Hey everybody, KC here. So there was a really interesting piece in the New York Times the other day by columnist Charles Blow, in which he talked about the evitability of marriage. He didn't use the word evitability. He was talking about the fact that marriage is no longer as inevitable as it used to be. I was actually kind of curious, if there's a word such as inevitable, is there a word such as evitable? In fact, it is. Not many people use it anymore, but I kind of like it. So he was writing about the evitability of marriage. And the point he was making was that in 1970, if you look at the adults between the ages of 25 and 50, in 1970, roughly 9% of that group had never been married. 20 years later, the number had grown a lot. It was almost 20%. And in 2019, the percentage of U.S. adults who were either not married or not living together with another partner, that number was 38%, pretty close to 38%. Now, some of those people were previously married, but the point is there's a growing percentage of the U.S. adult population that is not involved in a relationship in which they're cohabiting with another person. Marriage rates are at a low. And there's been a lot of talk about how the divorce rate actually went up during the pandemic because people found themselves spending a lot more time with their partners and said, this is maybe not what I want to do. Now, the point that Blow made is that marriage is a prevailing ideal, no longer it has the grip on society that it used to have not that long ago. Now, listen, I'm hardly anti-marriage. I have been in the same, I've been married to the same woman for 38 plus years. But the older I get, the more I realize that what's really important is not the marriage, but the commitment, right? I know a lot of people who are pro-family values and pro-marriage, and they're so pro-marriage, they've been married 2, 3, 4 times. You know, that's not my definition of commitment. That's not the road I want to go down. I do think this is something that retailers have to think about because of just demographic changes, right? If suddenly you're not necessarily going to be catering to married couples and the families that most of them pretend to produce, you've suddenly got to think differently about how you market. You know, we've talked a long time here about Morning News Beat about the whole urbanization trend, right? That where people used to, you know, they get married in their early 20s, they'd have kids, they'd get a house, they'd have a minivan, then they'd, you know, that was the kind of world in which they were living, and therefore they had to buy to satisfy the demands of that world. As urbanization took place and people were getting married later and having fewer kids and maybe not living in a house with a basement and maybe not even owning a car, suddenly the way you market to those people changes a little bit. Now, listen, the pandemic kind of threw that trend a curve, right? Because suddenly people were saying, I'm not sure I want to live in an urban environment. I think I might want to rather live in a house with a basement and maybe spend more time with my kids. And have to you know, shop for a world that is maybe different than it was 2 years ago. But I do think, you know, listen, cities are going to come back. I don't think there's any question about that. I think that the urbanization trend will once again might take hold in different kinds of ways. But I'm not sure that the notion of people not necessarily wanting to get married, not necessarily wanting to live with a partner, I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon. And I think it's the kind of thing, again, that retailers need to think about. As these changes take place, it's not like they take place in a vacuum. And as retailers come to market, it's not like they can come to market in a vacuum. All these things affect one another. And it's important for retailers to say, okay, how do we cater to this changing world in a way that we've done it in the past? It's actually a pretty simple question, although coming up with the answers can be a lot more difficult. Anyway, that's what's on my mind. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.